Hi guys, welcome to the Startup Zone. I'm your host Haris Bakri. I'm here with a special guest, Philip Seifi, and he is the co-founder of Pona. It's a home-cooked food marketplace, and he spent 9 years in edutech, where he was the CEO and co-founder of LingwaLive. Prior to that, he also able to speak 7 languages at different level, and I hope that you're able to listen and engage with him in this episode. So welcome on board, Philip.
Thank you for having me. Nice meeting you.
So here we are with you, and why not share about something really interesting that we can learn something, which is you actually managed to be in Prague, and then being in the French school in Prague again, and then move on to Harvard and did exchange in Japan. So how was it like a student in a different city, but also to mention is that you're Russian?
Yeah, so my life has been all over the map, and I was born in Moscow, and spent time in Denmark actually as well for a year when I was like 6 or 7, I can't even remember anymore. And then I lived in Prague, went to a French school and a German school before that, and it has been quite a roller coaster. And I think it was certainly a formative experience for me to experience all these different cultures, go to different countries, meet different people. And kind of what I liked about it, or kind of in hindsight, I think what it gave me is that by meeting all these different people in different cultures and different countries, you realize how we can live in very different ways, right, and still live a very meaningful life, and be very productive, and improve the world in all kinds of different ways. And it really allows you to understand what's important to you. This allows you to better understand your own thinking, unlike when you spend your entire life in a single bubble where you were born, and then you never, you can never appreciate how different, how things don't fall apart the moment you change the way you live a little bit.
So since you went to French school and you also went to German school, and you're able to pick up 7 languages. So how do you manage to cope with that? I mean, you're considered as a polyglot then.
It wasn't my intention originally, right? I was born in Russia, so I learned Russian. I went to the Czech Republic and learned Czech because I was living there and everyone was speaking that language. Eventually, I started learning German in German school, which was very much my parents' decision to send me to an international school, and I'm very thankful for that. And later on, learned French in a French school. Again, my parents' decision. At the end of the French school, that's actually a really funny story for why I started learning Japanese. Okay. So my French school offered me to learn Latin, as many French schools do. And I thought that Latin is a pretty useless language, which I'll never use again in my life. And so I said no, but then I felt a bit lazy. I felt like I should learn some other language instead. And I just noticed this book actually while visiting my relatives in Moscow that had Japanese characters on it. And I just liked how they looked. I love typography, I love design. Design is something very close to my heart. And just, those beautiful, Chinese characters and hiragana and katakana, I thought, whatever this language is, that's what I'm going to learn next. And so on a 2-day and 2-night train ride from Moscow back to Prague, I learned the basic Japanese alphabet. And that was kind of my first step in that direction. And it's only 1 or 2 years after that I went and started actually learning the language at a conversational level.
So right now you're the co-founder of Pona, and then previously also LingwaLive. So you had a startup before that also, which is called Nihongo Up. So can you tell me what's it about?
So Nihongo Up was a game that I developed while I was in the first year of high school in junior high, and it was a learning game for learners of Japanese. And so I was really passionate about design and programming at the time, and I wanted to build something that would let me push my skills further in both of these disciplines, but at the same time helped me improve my Japanese language. And so I started developing this game originally for my own use. Then I put it online. People liked it. They started paying me little amounts of money, and eventually this game grew into LinguaLift, which became a whole business in and of its own after I graduated from high school.
All right. So actually, when you transformed to LinguaLift, what were the experiences like running your first startup ever in life?
So it was very, very. It was a very slow transition, right? It was a very peaceful transition. I started by solving a problem, which was the Nihongo app learning game. I just identified that there's no product on the market that could help me learn the Japanese writing system. After that, I started, receiving feedback from that game's users, all kinds of emails, and they would tell me to add this feature and that feature, and add all kinds of learning methodologies within the app. And over time, it became bigger and bigger. It became an online website. As mobile technologies matured, it became a mobile app as well. So it was a very long transition. I don't think it was there was a single point when a project became a business.
So actually, while you're sharing that, what were some mistakes or experiences that you can share about before you starting up LinguaLift?
So actually, before starting LinguaLift and before even starting Nihongo app, I had a try at building a different kind of company, which was an online royalty stock website.
Right.
So the likes of iStock or Shutterstock, where you can buy photos and videos for single use. I identified a market gap for a website like this for Flash files, and that was in the olden days when Flash was still a thing, and I was one of the proud Flash developers at the time. And I found a guy in Czech Republic who had similar ideas, and his name was Mirek, and we met together in a pub one day, threw around some ideas, and then started working on this project for 10 years, for 10 months at the beginning. Launched it in a very kind of simple way, didn't really work out, raised venture capital raised investment from an angel investor. And we didn't really know the word startup at the time. We didn't really know that the startup ecosystem existed, and it probably didn't exist in Prague actually at the time. And so some of the mistakes we made were very, were so obvious in hindsight. So we tried to build everything that we thought this website would have to do eventually, in 1 year, in 2 years, and 3 years down the line. We translated it into 15 different languages. We had different sections for 5 different types of files. We supported payment infrastructure in different countries and different currencies. And of course, now, thinking through this project through startup plans, through the lean startup plans, it's so obvious that what we should have built as an MVP is a minimum viable product. We should have built the minimum necessary to sell a Flash file and launch that instead of spending loads of money and time over designing this product.
Cool.
And it was a very formative learning experience for me, which I always try to keep in mind when working on new projects. But I keep making the mistake again and again.
Right.
It's so difficult to keep things small and constrained and simple at the beginning.
So actually, I also read some of your interview before that. I had the review on the Hacker Noon, where you had to deal with your first PR disaster as a startup. So what do you have to deal with, and how do you actually overcome with that actually?
So that was these were some difficult days. So a few years after we founded LinguaLift with my co-founder Oli, things didn't go particularly well. We tried to save money on a user authentication database provider. We tried to cut corners on our payment gateway provider, and first the payment gateway provider that I'll happily name, called Rick Hurley, and they're still surprisingly in business, lost all our credit card data from one day to another because they had a database loss and they didn't do proper backups. a few months later, our user authentication provider went out of business and literally just disappeared from one day to another with essentially all our user data. And that was a stage when we could have gone bankrupt, and we were really scared, and we thought that this is it for our business. But surprisingly enough, people loved our product so much that when we sent them an email, they were understanding, they were supportive, they signed up for a new account, they inputted their payment details again. And that was actually really reassuring, and what pushed us forward, pushed us to continue working this project, is how supportive our community has been despite these, the only way to call it is a really big fuck up.
Right. So actually, since you say about mentioning about community, actually, do startups now consider community as one of the most important, essential in their business strategy, actually?
So nowadays, there's so many books and blog posts written about community management, and community manager has become a really respected role in the startup ecosystem. I think when we were building Lingualift, we didn't think about it as much. We just did it. So for the first few hundred customers, we called every single one of them on the phone, asking them how the experience went, asking them how we could improve the product. And this wasn't because we wanted to build a community. This is because we wanted to build a really good product, and we knew that the best way to do that is to listen to our customers. Eventually, our community did grow, and it became really quite international. So whenever we traveled to a different country, we would message all our users in intercom that hailed from a particular city, and we met up for drinks, for a meal, and that was really, really nice. But I don't think we ever aimed to build our community. It happened because we had a good product that many people used over long periods of time, and they were engaged with.
So about this actually, since you already moved on to your new project, what have you learned in your 9 years in edutech, and what are some key experiences or key highlights that you'd like to share?
So I'd like to repeat what I just said, in that you have to speak to your customers. And that is something we learned again and again and again, and we keep making the mistake of not speaking to customers early enough, including with our new project. For the first few months, we worked on it in our office, in our little bubble, without actually talking to home cooks, without talking to potential customers. And some of the assumptions we've made, over time we realized were probably wrong, or they were not as targeted for a particular user base as we thought. A good example from the Lingualift days was the time when we redesigned the whole website. And so we spent 2 months working on this massive redesign, and changes to the information architecture, changes to the way the lessons are organized. And when we launched, it led to an absolute disaster, with people leaving the website, people canceling their subscriptions because they no longer recognize that is the service they signed up for, because it was no longer the product that they paid to use. And many of the ideas that we thought are really good and are solving some of the problems we identified on the website were not actually all that helpful to our customers in their particular use case. And so the big lessons we learned from that experience is that whenever you're making major changes to your product, you have to test it with smaller groups of your customers first and gather their feedback in focus groups, in surveys, do A/B testing, screen recording, and so on. And this is something that we're doing with our new project, of course, meeting with home cooks, showing them the app first, and only making incremental changes at each step, instead of launching a massive redesign with a new logo and a new color scheme and everything, when it basically becomes a different product.
So you mentioned about your new project called Pona. It's a home cook-based marketplace that lets like the housewife to be cooking at home and while doing all that. So can you share me about Pona, and why Malaysia, and also why TTDI as the first city actually?
So my co-founder and I, we've traveled around the world, and something we noticed is that some of our best memories come from around the dinner table. It's, sharing home cooked food with our host. It's, listening to the amazing story of, recipes passed down through generations. And we wanted to highlight these home cooks within their community and worldwide, really. And so roughly a year ago, we started working on this project, the marketplace for home cooked food. We also started producing a cooking series, Home Cooks of the World, and a podcast called My Signature Dish. And the aim of all these projects is to highlight talented home cooks, show that they're as good or better than restaurants where most people consume their food.
Right.
And originally we received funding for this project in Silicon Valley. We went to San Francisco for almost 6 months and we tried to launch there. Unfortunately, we couldn't for legal and immigration reasons. And this is why we're in Malaysia. Malaysia has a really welcoming ecosystem. The government has been helping us tremendously, particularly MDEC. We've had extremely friendly support in terms of immigration, in terms of setting up the company here, and in terms of managing all the food safety and other kind of legislative issues which surround a project like ours.
So actually when you're running the marketplace in both sides, which one do you prioritize the most? Is it the vendor or the customer first?
Well, the famous chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
There's a few approaches to deal with this. Some people would say that you should target the side that is paying you money first, because it's more difficult to get people to give you money than to get people to take money from you. Interestingly though, what we found with this project is that for us it's much more important to onboard a really high quality group of sellers rather than find buyers, because buyers come for good food. If there's good food, good variety of food, if our offering is better than what you can get on GrabFood, on Damakan, this is how we attract buyers. It's not by spending more money on advertising. And so my kind of suggestion for early stage marketplace startups is to pick one, choose one side that is most difficult to acquire and that is most central to the quality of your product, and then focus on that for the first few weeks, just finding a large enough pool on that side of the marketplace. So in our case, we're making sure that we have at least a few dozen really high quality cooks on our platform in the early days. We're visiting their kitchens, we're interviewing them, we're tasting their food, we're taking really nice professional photos of their food. And this way we can manage the experience in the early stages. Eventually, of course, things become more decentralized, but the quality of your initial offering, that is what sets the bar, right? So when the cook number 100, the cook number 1000 joins the platform, they will be inspired by all the other people on the platform that we helped create a good profile, and they will feel a responsibility to meet that standard, rather than if we just let random people sign up in the early days.
Right. So actually, since you mentioned about that, actually, so how do you assess the vendor's quality and also assess maintain the quality assurance that's set by your company, and how do you plan to create that?
So as I mentioned, we visit each of the cooks' kitchen, we inspect it, we provide them basic food safety training, actually using our EdTech background. And finally, we have a review system which is very similar to GrabFood or Uber Eats or Damakan, where each time you order food, you rate the experience, both the quality of the meal itself and the quality of the experience of buying from that particular chef, the packaging and so on. And if the rating drops too low, we ban them from the platform. If there's a food safety incident, if there's a food poisoning incident, we report them to the local authorities, and after 2 or 3 incidents, we remove them from the platform. And so we're very careful and we're very conscious of the importance of ensuring high quality on a marketplace like this. And of course, we provide liability insurance to both the buyers and the sellers in case something does happen, whether because of our cooks or more likely because of other third-party issues such as the quality of the ingredients or maybe delivery.
So since Pona is the early stage right now, what are your aspirations right now in next 6 months or in 2 years time actually?
So in the next 6 months, our plan is to expand beyond Tamantun. And I forgot to answer your question, why Tamantun, why TTDI?
Yeah, true.
The reason we're launching in that particular area is that it's highly community minded. It's focused on families, everyone knows each other, everyone trusts each other. It's very easy to live within that area. And so we can focus on validating some of our assumptions, such as whether people are interested in buying home cooked food and for what reasons, such as whether our platform and our payouts infrastructure and our payment gateway infrastructure is working correctly. And we can leave other questions, such as whether people would trust home cooked food for one of our next expansion stages. And so in Tamantun, the community is really helpful. It's really on board. We've met with community leaders, we've met people from the community garden in Tamantun, and everyone is really excited about the project and is looking for ways how they can help us. And we think that it's crucial that in the early stages, we have this very limited trial where we can control every step, every touch point of the user experience. And once we're confident that our services are the quality that we want it to be, we can expand beyond that area.
So yes, let's talk aside something from what you actually are doing actually. So let's talk about something that's happening right now, which is the WeWork.
Yeah.
So you actually you actually you managed to grow and also gain some revenue from doing all this without any external funding. What are your thoughts and your views about why WeWork is at this stage right now?
So WeWork, I think there's a lot said about WeWork these days, and there's many good overviews online that analyze the psychology of the investors and the management and kind of all the reasons behind it. But I think it's very easy to simplify the lessons that we should learn from this, from what's happening. Many people are saying that this is the end of startups raising big money in VC. Some people say that this is the end of startups operating at a loss in the early years. Some say that you should bootstrap your business and should forget about VC altogether. And I think this is all too simplistic. Whether you raise VC and how you operate depends largely on your business and your business model. If you're launching an online learning platform, such as we did with Lingualift, go ahead and bootstrap. If you're launching any kind of software as a service, go ahead and bootstrap. You'll be more focused, you'll own 100% of your company, which is great when you finally exit, and you'll have more freedom to answer the demands of your customers instead of your investors who might have very different priorities. On the other hand, if you're building a marketplace like we're doing now, unfortunately, it's impossible to bootstrap. There are large upfront costs. You have to provide certification. You might have all kinds of equipment costs, rental costs, particularly if you're working in the food industry where a lot of the operations has to be financed upfront. And the thing is, the problem is not with companies operating at a loss in the early years. The problem is with companies not having clarity about the way the unit economics will work out 3, 4, 5 years down the line. So companies like WeWork, I think what's going to happen now is that VCs are going to be much more demanding in terms of really clear explanations of the unit economics. They won't just trust that if the market is big enough, then in 5-10 years down the line, you'll figure out how to make money out of it. They will ask you upfront in year 1, year 2, Series A, Series B, how exactly do you plan to make money in year 5? And if you have an answer, I think they'll still be fine with you operating at a loss in the early years, because it still remains a fact that in many industries, one winner will take the entire market internationally. In some industries, it's 2 or 3 companies. In either case, it's important to go and operate at a fast rate and leverage those economies of scale, which are oftentimes absolutely essential for your economics to actually work out right. Especially as a marketplace, again, if you're doing delivery, if you have large upfront costs, rental costs, it might be impossible to be profitable in the first few years until you reach a national or international scale. But you have to have that clarity. How do you make money in year 3, year 5? And I'm sure that investors will be much more demanding in that regard.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, last but not least, actually, what do you think of what kind of advice do you like to give actually for as a marketplace founder to another marketplace founder actually?
My advice as a marketplace founder is to think really hard about how your marketplace dynamics will work out at the local level and at the network level. So to give you a few examples, one mistake many startups do is they grow too fast. And what happens is that they don't have the right density in each individual location. This, of course, assumes marketplaces such as ours, which are hyper-local, where most of our sellers are within a particular radius from the buyers. Mm-hmm. And so the biggest mistake we could do is expand across scale too quickly. And what's going to happen is we'll have maybe 100 sellers in one area and they won't have enough demand, in which case they will leave the platform. And maybe in another part of town, we'll have too many buyers interested in home-cooked food, but not enough variety of sellers, in which case the experience will be subpar and they will leave the platform. Mm-hmm. And so it's crucial to control the supply and demand and balance it out in a way that creates the optimal sustainable experience for both sides. Right. The second part is that you have to think about everything you do, not at a transactional level, but at a marketplace and the network level. So to give you another example, Grab, Uber, the way they worked in the early days is that you would order a Grab and you would get the closest car that is right next to you. But what that meant is that sometimes another user in a different part of that city would order the next Grab and their wait time would end up being 15, 20 minutes. Because you ordered the Grab, which was closest to them, 5 seconds earlier. So what these companies do now is they look at all the people that have the app open at the same time, and they optimize the matching based on the network level effect. So sometimes what happens, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is that you walk out, you see all the Grabs lined up, you order a Grab, and they match you with a car that's like 10 minutes away. Yeah. And you're wondering, why is that the case? Well, the reason is that this minimizes the wait time, not just for you, but also for another person who might be closest to some of the other Grabs, and you might not even realize exist. Similarly, many people complain why Airbnb doesn't allow you to filter by ratings. Again, for Airbnb, they can't just think about whether you'll make a booking at that particular stage. They have to think about maximizing the lifetime value of all the people trying to make a booking at that particular stage, and making sure that the hosts have a good experience, particularly in the early weeks when they join the platform. They need to make a lot of sales very quickly to get engaged in that process. And so these kinds of things you have to really think through. And we are, of course, with our marketplace, where we're making sure that our cooks, for example, they don't get one order every single day. They would much more prefer to get 7 orders in one day and then have free time for the next 6 days. So these kinds of little tweaks, they're not obvious at the beginning, but you have to think about them very early on for the marketplace to be a success.
Right. So I think we can reach a conclusion right now. Thanks for having you, Philip.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it was very nice having you.
So thanks for watching. We hope that you might be having another missed episodes. You can watch other previous videos. And yes, thank you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.